Today on the DML News Podcast, Kamala Harris visits the border. Finally, it's a tongue twister, man, because I'm so shocked she did it. TSA is allowing illegal aliens on domestic flights without identification. Kamala gets a Arizona endorsement from a so-called Republican, and now non-citizens are cops, at least in Mr. Walz's state anyhow. We've got an incredible show for you today, including an interview with Sheriff Mark Dannels out of the Tucson sector. So get ready, because it's all unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. Across from me is my son, Denny. On the controls is my son, Ryan. We are family, and we are happy to have you with us today on this excellent Monday. It is a beautiful day in Florida. I mean, beautiful. The weather is really starting to change here for the better. And with that being said, a few things I want to talk to you about before I get into my monologue. We're going to talk heavily today about immigration, the border, Kamala Harris's visit. We have Mark Dannels is going to be joining us in about 20 minutes, and we have a lot to speak about. It's going to be a very powerful show. A few things here just to tell you at the forefront. Team DML. Tomorrow night is the VP debate, and for Team DML members, we will be having a live program. You can watch it via the app on tab 5 if you are a Team DML member, or you go straight to teamdml.com. Again, we offer this very cheap during election season. For an entire year, you could be a member for just $30. Just $30. Usually goes for $200. So, and I want to give you, it's funny, Denny, I just got something on Facebook. In fact, I'll tell about it. There is a post pinned to the top of my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/DML News App. And I am going to officially send the letter today. I've been writing it for a couple weeks to the Trump campaign about why it is that President Trump should allow me to interview him, preferably at Mar-a-Lago. I would sit down with him and have an interview like no other person has had one with him. I don't want to hear about the FBI, the DOJ, January 6th, 2020 election, Kamala Harris. I don't care about any of that stuff. I mean, I care about it, but I don't care to talk about it. I want to have an interview with the president where we sit down for an hour or more if he wants. I would design this interview to be clip ready, meaning that although the interview would be an hour, I would want to make at least 20 good, short, going viral sort of clips to be used all over social media, because my focus would be on Trump policies. It is time for the independents and undecided voters and the Republicans who traditionally sit on the sidelines, or people who just don't like Trump. I want them to hear a guy, an independent like myself, give the president the sort of interview that needs to be done. Because right now, all we ever hear, Dennis, is we get interviews from the left trying to get him in a gotcha. They try to make him look like a racist, a hater, etc. Then you get the interviews from the people on the right who just want to kiss his ass and say the same thing in an echo chamber to the people who are already going to go out and vote for him. I'm looking for the people who decide elections. And I'll be the first one to say, I don't like Trump. I don't hate Trump. I respect Trump. I don't know him to like him. I mean, I like what he does. I don't know him to hate him. I've never seen a person more loved and more hated in one lifetime than Trump. But you must respect that man, because that man has more fight in him than anybody I've ever known. And I don't mean known with a handshake. I mean just known of in my life. He is the Mike Tyson on steroids of politics. And, you know, America wants a fighter. And when you look at the Republican Party, they don't have any fight. When you look at the Democrats, they have all the fight in the world, but they always fight for the wrong thing. Trump is fighting for the right things. And so for me, this isn't personal. That's why I say I don't like him. I don't hate him. He's just another guy. I want to talk to him about the policies and about what we're going to do so this way people can afford living in America. So this way people will know that their borders are secure and that their world is not going to blow up, because those are the three things we all universally want. So with that said, I posted the appeal on Facebook. I said, let's pretend like his campaign is reading this. I posted it last night. We've had well over already 1,000 comments alone. We've had many thousands and thousands of people liking it, but over 1,000 comments alone of people saying, Mr. President, you need to have DML interview you. It would be the best interview of all time. And I appreciate those comments. I did get one here, Dennis, and I just want to read it because I think it's a lot of fun. This is from an Anne-Marie Spinelli Volker. Now, I posted the picture of me, you, and Ryan promoting the podcast. She wrote, great picture. I have been listening to you for years, like many on here. The church bells during the walk-in talks, if you remember that during the walk-in talks when I used to do that on Facebook, I used to go to the church bells at 12 o'clock every day. But I was listening a little before that too. I remember the studio where there was so much fixing going on and setting up in New York. That was that big estate we had. I loved that podcast too. You would take phone calls or read letters. It felt so personal. So there you go. I just read your letter. So with that said, we are going to get right into what I think is very personal because it impacts all of us. We're going to talk about the border. You know, people like Anne-Marie have been following me since I got into this business, and I got into this business back in 2008. That's how long it has been since I got into media. As you may know, I lived 9/11. I'm one of the people who ran from the buildings. And when I look at immigration, I see multiple different things. I see national security risk. I see people losing jobs. I see people being exposed to human trafficking, sexual assault. I see so many bad things with fentanyl and drugs and the drug cartels. There is nothing that comes from an open border that is positive unless you're a Democrat and you want to change the face of this country, you want to change the voting bloc, and you want to lower the country to its knees. That's where we're going. We're going to be falling to our knees, begging the likes of China and Russia and Iran and every other foe that we have to please have mercy on us. Since 2008, I have been taking the border very seriously, maybe more seriously than anybody else in the United States, other than those people like the sheriff that you're about to meet in 20 minutes from now, who have spent a life at that border watching the crime and the drugs and the people just cross over without any repercussion. I've made 4 films on this. I can tell you as an independent, I wouldn't give a rat's ass if the most radical liberal in the world was to come in and say, I'm going to secure the border. I'd vote for them if I really meant it. Because I know that so many of the problems that we face in this country, both financial and human, are the result of illegal immigration, open borders. And it's not just in the southern border. It's in the northern border as well. The northern border has dangerously become wide open. We've had more people cross in the past 13 months in the northern border sectors than we have for the past 13 years added together. Let that number sink in. Let it also sink in that the greatest importer of Iranians is Canada. With that said, there's one liberal who is trying to tell the entire United States that she is going to close the border. She calls it a new way forward. How can Kamala Harris be a new way forward? Kamala Harris has had nearly 4 years to prove her value at the border. She was named border czar by Joe Biden, as much as she and the mainstream media would like to pretend as if she was not. We can play the video for you where Joe Biden had a press conference and put Kamala Harris in charge of the border. I have made 4 films. I have spent a life, an adult life, at that border in every capacity you can possibly imagine. I did it as a filmmaker. I did it as an investigative journalist. I did it as just an American wanting to go see what it was. I embedded with the Border Patrol. I have seen it inside out and upside down. I have gone undercover. I've gone along the Rio. I've been in San Diego. I've been in Arizona. I've been up by New York and Vermont, where the crossings are there. You see it right in front of you. I've been there during the snowfall. I've been there during rain. I've been there during 105-degree temperatures. And it doesn't matter the weather. It doesn't matter the location. Our borders are wide open. And I worry about this day in and day out. I lived 9/11. I know what it's like when people are standing in a building window 80 stories above you, and the better death is that of jumping from that window. We're not taking it seriously. And Kamala Harris goes to the border on Friday to not only make a fool of herself, but to insult you, to insult the sheriffs, to insult the Border Patrol agents, to make it sound as if this was something of importance to her. Damn you, Kamala Harris. If this was important to you, you wouldn't have waited 3.5 years to make your first appearance at the border. And then secondly, you did nothing more than 20 minutes. How do you go spend nearly less than 20 minutes at the greatest issue, the greatest point of pain that this country is suffering from? Everything is being affected. Our schools. We are going broke on trying to teach people who don't know how to speak English to become an American student. We're neglecting our own students for the sake of political correctness. Our hospitals. Try to go into a hospital and see how quickly you get treated. You're going to be in a long line of illegal aliens using the hospital as a primary care physician. Look at the unemployment and the employment in this country. All the jobs are going to the foreign-born. We got people living in tents, living in squalor, people who are getting evicted at rates that are neck-breaking when you look at the speeds, defaulting on mortgages, defaulting on rents, defaulting on car payments. And yet, we're taking illegal aliens under Kamala Harris and putting them in posh hotels, giving them free phones, giving them free food, and giving them free legal services. None of this makes sense. Unless, of course, you are Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Barack Obama, and you are trying to change the face of this nation through a fundamental transformation that Barack Obama said he wanted. 20 minutes at the border. What was it, too hot, Kamala? Did you see some cartel on the other side of the fence and you didn't want them to take your picture? Trust me, they know who you are. I am going to play right now a 2-minute video from Fox News Channel. It is eye-popping when you hear how many criminal, and this is convicted criminal aliens, illegal aliens are in this country roaming free right now, including convicted murderers. Make sure you listen to this. Play the video, Ryan.
It's a jaw dropper, to say the least. So to set the stage here, let me just explain what these numbers mean. ICE has something called a non-detained docket. Essentially what that is it means migrants who were encountered by DHS but are no longer in federal custody. So who's on this non-detained docket? It's illegal immigrants who were caught and released at the border, released with the court date years away. They're in immigration proceedings, combined with illegal immigrants who have already been ordered deported from the country by a judge but are still here roaming the country. So keep that in mind, this non-detained docket. According to a letter that the acting director of ICE just sent to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez, on ICE's non-detained docket, they're currently tracking 425,000 non-citizens who have been convicted of a crime. Of that number, over 13,000 non-citizens have convictions for homicide and are on the non-detained docket, meaning they're roaming the country right now. On top of that, there are another 15,811 non-citizens convicted of sexual assault who are roaming the country right now on ICE's non-detained docket. It doesn't stop there. Those are convictions. The ICE director also says there are currently just under 1,900 non-citizens on the non-detained docket who have pending homicide charges who are roaming the country, and another 4,250 non-citizens who have pending sexual assault charges who are roaming the country on the non-detained docket. So people's eyes might be glazing over right now with all the numbers we just threw at you. Just to put it in a nutshell right here, what we've learned from the acting ICE director via this letter to Congressman Tony Gonzalez is right now there are over 13,000 illegal aliens convicted of homicide who are roaming the United States right now. There are another 15,811 illegal aliens roaming the country right now who have been convicted of sexual assault. And there are even more who are facing charges for homicide and charges for sexual assault. So this just goes to show, guys, the non-detained docket has exploded under the Biden administration to over, I believe it's 7.3 million. They're anticipating it could hit 8 million by the end of the year.
425,000 convicted criminals, 13,000 of them being murderers, 16,000 of them being criminals of sexual assault of some kind. I wonder how many of those are in children, by the way. Then you have another 1,900 pending homicide and 4,250 pending sexual assaults. This is insane. This is incredibly insane. And when I talk about 9/11, you know, it's more than 20 years ago that happened. So it starts to become less of a memory for most people, except for me, of course. I could keep my eyes open right now and see people jumping from the building, and I see myself covered in soot running from those buildings. The way that those terror attacks were carried out, in case you were living under a rock, is they were carried out by men who used fake identifications and took control of an airplane. You'd think we'd learn a lesson. You think that we would say, hey, man, we're letting these people into the country. That's one thing, but we're not going to let them on airplanes. I'm going to play a video for you right now. It's going to blow your mind. Senator Josh Hawley interviewing the head of the TSA. We are now allowing illegal aliens without any identification to get on airplanes by using their warrants for arrest as proof of who they are. Ryan, play the video.
I think for every person watching this hearing who has experienced the TSA screening process, it can often be very onerous. People who have done absolutely nothing wrong are law-abiding citizens in every respect, are subject to the most invasive screenings at these airports. Yet you're allowing illegal aliens to present warrants for arrest and waving them onto airplanes. How does that make sense?
Not doing that, sir.
You just told me that you've let 1,000 people travel on airlines who present to you warrants for arrest.
Yes,
right?
sir. And they present those warrants. That warrant is the beginning of an identity verification process, which follows.
Why isn't it the end? Why isn't that the end of the process? And you say, sorry, you have a warrant for an arrest. We're not going to allow you to get on airplane.
Because we want to identify who's presenting themselves at the screening checkpoint.
Boy, I think you're going to have a hard time explaining to folks who are randomly selected, or sometimes perhaps not so randomly selected for enhanced screenings, but you're allowing illegal aliens with warrants for arrest to get onto airplanes, and you've allowed at least 1,000 of them in this calendar year. I mean, I just find that totally extraordinary.
How despicable. How despicable. I don't understand it anymore, Dennis. It is almost as if any person who works in an agency is trying to do what they should do to the complete opposite. In other words, if I said to you, Dennis, make sure you look both ways before you cross the street, instead of doing that, you would just dodge out into the street. That's the way the behavior is. And to make matters worse, not only is this all happening under Kamala Harris's watch, but there are Republicans who are actually supporting Kamala Harris. And when I say Republicans, Dennis is going to tell you and give you a statement from a senator who comes from Arizona, now retired, but an Arizona border state senator who was part of the Gang of Eight immigration bill. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's actually Jeff Flake, and his last name literally lives up to his demeanor. This was his official quote or statement regarding his endorsement. I'm a conservative. I believe in the rule of law. First and foremost, I want to support a presidential candidate that respects the rule of law, somebody who, if they lose an election, wouldn't try to use the presidential powers to overturn that election. So that's Jeff Flake claiming that Kamala is going to be the candidate of the rule of law when she can't even go more than 30 minutes at the border when she was anointed the border czar for the last 4 years and has done virtually absolutely nothing, which we're going to learn more about how she's done nothing in the interview that we got coming up with the sheriff.
Jeff Flake claiming he's a conservative is like me claiming that I'm from Somalia. I mean, it's just that bat crazy to try to get away with that. For people who forget, Jeff Flake was a senator along the same lines, or I should say the same time, as Senator John McCain. Both of them left of center, who pretended to be Republicans. They're beyond rhinos. They created what was called the Gang of Eight bill back in, I believe it was 2010 on or about. And that Gang of Eight bill was thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. It included the ideas of 4 Republicans and the idea of 4 Democrats. They called it a nonpartisan comprehensive immigration reform. And that bill was about as despicable as the bill that Kamala Harris continues to tout that Trump told everybody not to vote for, as if this was going to solve the problems of illegal immigration at the border. Now, I was making They Come to America 2 at the time. This is when Hannity gave me a full hour for a special on my film. And I remember very clearly. I'll give you an example of the kind of things that conservative Jeff Flake was pushing for. They wanted to give an amnesty. You couldn't get the amnesty if you were one of these 425,000 convicted felons, unless you killed somebody in a car accident. That was allowed because that was a traffic infraction. So think about this for one moment. I take you back to Ohio, where that father recently made a fool of himself and got up from Ohio, I think he was from, right? His son was killed by an illegal alien who didn't have a license, didn't know how to drive, crashed into a school bus, and the little boy died. That father got up and said, hey, Republicans, stop using my son to weaponize and to be evil, which is a podcast in of itself. But in that particular story, under the Gang of Eight bill that Jeff Flake wanted, that illegal alien would allow to be able to get amnesty. Because although he killed somebody, he did it unintentionally through a vehicle that he was driving illegally. That is a conservative? That's not a conservative. We don't have conservatives in this country. I go back to what I said in the opening of the show. It's not whether I like Trump or hate Trump. I respect Trump because Trump does respect the rule of law. Jeff Flake says, I want a president who's going to use the presidential power to overturn an election. Did Trump overturn the election? No, he didn't. These Democrats, and Flake is one of them, create these nonsense narratives that don't exist.
They don't. And look, I think what we're seeing here, especially with a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz ticket, is the dilution of the rule of law. It just seems like the law or our established Constitution and everything that we have built over 300 years, each year just kind of gets chipped away. I mean, Minneapolis just hired their first non-U.S. citizen police officer. She's from Somalia. Her name's Leslie Vera. And Ryan, if you want to turn the camera to me, I think you do. This is her wearing her hijab. Yeah.
Yeah, bring that a little bit more to me, so this way we could see it a little bit better. There you go. You turn that. No, okay, now put it on right.
Leslie Vera, a non-U.S. citizen, first cop hired in Tim Walz's home state of Minnesota.
She's got a whole high job going, the whole thing.
Yes, and again, non-U.S. citizen. She does not have legal status as an American citizen. She's not. She's a Somalian, and yet she's about to be an officer who's going to dictate other citizens following the law. It doesn't make sense to me.
So let's get this down. You have somebody who broke our laws.
Yes.
If she's a non-citizen, well, she may have been brought over, and who knows how the hell she got here.
But it's the concept, the fact that she is not a legal citizen.
Yeah.
Dictating how legal citizens are going to operate in the rule of law.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
It makes absolutely zero sense. So imagine if you get pulled over by this woman and she's going to write you a ticket for speeding. I'm going to want to throw that ticket right in her face and say, take this back. I ain't taking anything from you. Are you out of your mind? This is Tim Walz. This is Tim Walz's state. There are people who want to vote for this. You want to know why they want to vote for it? one of two reasons. Either A, they're a non-citizen or a legal alien themselves.
Yes.
Two, they are a legal citizen. They came over and now they want more of the same. And I'll add a third, is it's not that they want this. They just hate Trump.
Yeah.
And the reason why they hate Trump is because they've been sold a bag of goods, and it's rotten goods. It's not true. Trump may not be the most articulate guy in the world. Sometimes he just uses name calling in areas where he shouldn't. It's all he knows. He's 78 years old. You're not going to teach an old dog a new trick.
There really is an illness with the left. I mean, as of right now, there is a 40-foot inflatable statue, I guess you could say, of Trump in Vegas right now, naked, that was put up by a leftist group. Can you imagine if that was done to Kamala Harris? It would be on every mainstream media site saying this is misogynistic, this is wrong, this is Republicans showing their true colors, and yet it's done of Trump, and they don't want to do anything about it.
Well, if it was done with Kamala Harris, the person who put it up would be arrested.
Yeah.
And if it happened in California, my God, Gavin Newsom would go absolutely bonkers.
Yep.
I go back to Trump. I mean, it's funny. I over the weekend, I went with a couple of friends to go see Tucker Carlson. And interesting show. He had Russell Brand and John Rich there. And they didn't talk about policy as much as I thought that they were going to, or even wish they would have. They went into more about religion and God and how the country has lost its way. And I agree with it wholeheartedly. And, you sit here and you look at somebody like Kamala Harris, who not only showcases her favoritism for criminals, but, I mean, when was the last time that you saw her show any sort of religious belief? When was the last time you saw her say anything thanks to God or did a prayer or anything? Trump all the time. Trump all the time is referring to God and even says how God wanted, at the hand of God is what kept him alive during 2 different assassination attempts. The people who give Trump a hard time, they forget that they are fallible as well. They make mistakes all the time. And do you really want Trump to change? I mean, I go back to being with my friends, over the weekend. One of my buddies, his name is Billy, just turned 80 years old. And we were talking about golf and how it is that this instructor is trying to change his grip. And he said, I'm going to give it a little bit more time, but I may have to go back to my old grip. And I know Bill is going to go back to his old grip. You want to know why? Because Bill was he was a 7 handicap. He was hitting in the 70s with his old grip. Now, it may not be, the traditional golfing grip, but Bill made it work. And I use that example because Trump made his way work. You're going to have a sheriff on in 2 minutes here, Sheriff Dannels, who met with Kamala Harris on Friday, who met with Trump 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he told you, not everybody liked what Trump did at the border, how he did it, but it worked.
Yep.
Those are his own words. Dennis recorded this interview on Friday. We're going to play it here in a couple minutes. So maybe a bit unconventional, maybe a bit hybrid, but Trump's ways work. And his economic plan works. His border plan worked. His plan for the world worked. But my problem is it's not getting out to the masses the way it should. That's why I want to interview him.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do right now is we're going to play the interview between Dennis and Sheriff Dannels. Very eye-opening. He tells one story about the hearse with the illegal aliens.
Oh, it was a great interview. And it's just funny because when we recorded it Friday, knowing that Kamala was going there, I know we discussed we got to make sure we cover what she did down there on Monday. And yet there's nothing to cover.
There's nothing to cover.
She went for
we
20.
Don't even have a video to
She
play.
talked to no one. She went for 20 minutes and then she dipped. Yeah.
So we're going to play the video right now, and then Dennis will close out the show. I just want to take the real quick commercial break here. We have the dmlcbd.com/store. dmlcbd.com/store. Now, the store doesn't have any CBD items. What we've been doing is, because we're going to be moving out of this warehouse sooner than later, we are clearing out all the inventory that we had in here from past sales, stuff that had been left over, et cetera, so forth, boxes that we found. We're finding boxes all the time of things. And so what we're doing is we're having this $10 blowout. You could buy any item that's up there, although there aren't many items there because we keep on putting up new ones. And every time we put new ones, they sell out in a day. And the reason why they're selling out a day is not only because we're selling them for $10, and these things usually go for $25, $35, $50, but we're giving you, through the DML Foundation, the courtesy of the DML Foundation, a free bottle of DML CBD face serum. I use this every single day. Women and men both swear by it. Helps with unwanted spots, unwanted lines. It gives a vitalization, revitalizes the skin, moisturizes it. I mean, I've been doing a lot in the sun lately. Keep on putting it on all the time to try to keep it. I mean, this is one of our best-selling products. It usually goes for $55. So I'll give you an example. Denny's book that he wrote last year, The Adventures of Robin, The Wild Adventures of Robin and Summer. This book, I think we were selling it on Amazon. They were going like crazy for like $27 or something of that nature. You'll get this book right now, signed by Denny, by the way. So that's signed in the inside right there. It says Denny 2024. You'll get this book for $10, brand new book, and you get a free DML CBD face serum. It's while supplies last. When we run out of the face serums, the $10 deal is over. That is DMLCBD.com/store. So without further ado, this interview, again, filmed on Friday. Sheriff Mark Dannels has been in a bunch of my immigration films. I've interviewed him a bunch of different times, but Denny does the interview here, and it is an eye-opening interview with a lot of great information. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and say, roll the tape.
So my first question to you actually has to do with Kamala Harris. 3 years since her becoming vice president, and I guess depending on how you want to framework it, the border czar, she finally visits the southern border, particularly at Douglas or in Douglas in Arizona, which is in Cochise County. So is this a case of just way too little too late?
So we get visitors from all over. We've always had a philosophy, come see us, get educated in the border, see our challenges, see our tragedies, and see our efforts and innovation. We want people to know, because the more educated people in America, especially our elected officials, the better off we are. In the case of Kamala Harris, America's sheriffs for the last 3.5 years have done everything we can as a united front of sheriffs, community leaders, to work with the White House and get President Biden and Kamala Harris to engage with us, to acknowledge us, and to prioritize public safety, national security, and humanitarian. That has not happened. Well, let's just be honest. They have not. They didn't even answer back, say, hey, well, we just don't want to meet with you. So when President Trump visited the county here month and a half ago, Senator Mark Kelly, our U.S. Senator here in Arizona, talked to me. And I made a comment to him. I said, can't you get the vice president to come see our realities on this border? And he goes, I will. I'll carry that message for you, Sheriff. I also talked to Chris Mays, our Arizona Attorney General, shared the same message because she had met with the vice president a couple times. So the combination of both, and 'tis the season politics, she is coming to Cochise County. It's being received with mixed emotions, mixed reviews based on, the timeliness of it, based on where have you been for 3.5 years. So again, it just goes back to the fact that she's coming. I will be greeting her today when she gets off the plane and at the airport, and to share, again, our realities, to share our tragedies. But hopefully, she's still the sitting vice president. She's got time. She doesn't, if she makes president, she takes over in January, but she's vice president till the end of the year. What can you do? You still have time to do something. And with President Biden kind of stepping aside, not being ill there, but stepping aside, she's pretty much running the country. So having her here, there is something. She has the opportunity now. Plus, she can't go back and say, I don't know anything about that. You're going to know about it after you visit Cochise County.
Yeah, I do want to ask about the Trump visit, but before we get more into that, with her being in office for these 3+ years, as well as Biden, and you already mentioned he has kind of been more on the sidelines regarding, with just his physical health alone, but also with his mental capacity. But, just from my time when I was with you guys those years back doing the ride along, I mean, you guys have a very critical, important county there. Have you, since Biden's been in office, have you guys received any significant help whatsoever in those last few years? Or have they kind of, like how you already kind of frameworked it, just almost been in ghost mode?
And I've said it before, I believe I've shared it with you before and your viewers, this intellectual avoidance and abandonment with intended consequences. No, the intended consequences has been tragic to our county. We see everything up from fair to yield pursuits every day, trespass issues, smugglers from all over the country coming here to partake in international crime to death, you name it. And we receive zero support when it comes to financial aid. Give you an example. What I mean by that is in 31 months, we booked 3,762 people in jail for border related crimes in Cochise County. These are crimes all the way from trespass, fair to yield, endangerment, reckless driving, kidnapping, murder. The federal government, my cost of that was $12.5 million. That's just the cost to incarcerate, not the cost to prosecute, defend, anything else comes with that. $12.5 million, I get zero support from the federal government. So all the money I get, if it wasn't for the state of Arizona and the partnership we have there with our congressional folks here at the state level, we'd be in trouble. We'd be in serious trouble. And so the federal government, that's why I talk about intellectual avoidance and abandonment. I keep saying this, Daniel, until they acknowledge it, until they engage it and they prioritize it, this is not going to change. That is my three objectives for Vice President Harris when she comes here. It was our objective for President Biden, who still has not engaged us.
Right. And I'll even jump to this next question then, because, as you said, it tis the season of politics. And I think anyone who lives in Cochise County obviously sees the reality you guys face every single day. And just, with my father or me, we have the awareness because we look into it. But the very big crux with this election is, okay, what's the independent voter going to sway towards? And if you got an independent voter, maybe in, Illinois or somewhere else in the country, I mean, illegal immigration impacts us all just in different factors. But for them, if almost like they don't see it visually, they may just not have a grasp on the idea of how bad it is. So maybe, for our audience, but also to the independent voter, in maybe the most layman's of terms, how would you describe the difference between, the Trump administration and the Biden administration when it comes to, that relation with them, in terms of securing the border and then just handling, illegal immigration as the crisis that it is?
Well, both candidates, Vice President Harris and President Trump, have report cards. And once people take off the political goggles, and I encourage that, take off the political goggles and look, you had a President Trump, that prioritized, acknowledged it, and engaged it with sheriffs, mayors, and the United States when it comes to having a secure border. Some people don't like the way he did it, but it worked. You also have a president now and vice president that have not prioritized it, have not acknowledged it, and have not engaged it. And we've had some record numbers, which we're still dealing with. We've had public safety challenges, as we know. We've had national security issues, as we know, things we've never seen on the border. I spent 4 decades down here. And last not least is the amount of deaths, the amount of recoveries we see in our deserts, in our counties. I mean, it's just at higher levels we've never seen. So 2 report cards. So once you take off the political goggles, if you want a country that doesn't have secure borders, you make your vote. If you want a country that needs and shall, and the forefathers put forward to have secure borders, you have a choice.
Right. Well, so I do want to ask about the visit President Trump had with you a few weeks back. I think it was late August. And I actually just learned about, I feel crazy for this, but I feel like I just learned about it today. We know about Butler, Pennsylvania, and we know about what just happened in West Palm with Ryan Ruth. But I wanted to ask about his visit to you and if he was in good spirits and just like the discussion with him. But I also learned this morning that there was even possibly another attempt. I think it was on social media within somewhere in Arizona where someone was threatening his life at the time when he came to visit you. Is that correct?
It is, Daniel. That's accurate. So 2 days before President Trump came here, and then it was advertised that he was coming to Cochise County, there was a social media post by an individual, I call him suspect now, where he made a threat, 2 threats actually, 2 days before, then the day before President Trump came. And my team of investigators actually went after that. We notified Secret Service right away, but we went after the threat. We went after him. We identified who he was. We found out he was a fugitive. He was a wanted individual for sex offenses and some other charges, plus the threat he was making. And we took those threats very seriously. We ended up identifying who he was. We went to his house, couldn't find him. He lived here in Cochise County. Long story short is we didn't give it up. We didn't say, hey, okay, well, we can't find him. We'll just keep everybody vigilant. No, we kept a team on this until President Trump left this county, but also until we had him in custody. Put it in perspective is the fact that when President Trump got here, he was in great spirits. I've met him. I sat on his Homeland Security Advisory Council before. He did what he did. I know when the press people asked the question, talk to us about the threat here in Cochise County. He was unaware of it. I hear that that's customary. Secret Service doesn't tell him if there's a threat. It kind of changed the tempo of his visit here once he found out about that. But that decision, let me go back. The night before President Trump arrived, we still couldn't locate this individual. At that time, I made an executive decision to post it to our community, to our public, and let our public help find this guy. And let him see that too, that we're looking for him. And I think that delayed any attempt that he had, number one, because we found him hiding away from the scene when we took him into custody. He's still, my knowledge, he's still sitting in my jail right now under state charges, not federal charges, but our charges.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, that's awesome of you guys, because I just election season always gets crazy, but I must say that this one in particular, with just all the different scenarios and incidents and events that Trump has had to face in just a 6-month time span alone, is remarkably crazy and dangerous. So, and you know what? Speaking of dangerous, because I do want to ask you about this. We get our listeners asking about it a lot. With Trende Aragua, the Venezuelan criminal gang, cartel gang that I think Governor Abbott just even labeled as a terrorist organization last week, is obviously a very big growing concern in this country, and their spread has become just beyond concerning. What just happened with Aurora, Colorado, with them taking over the apartment complexes. Have you been dealing with them as a problem in Cochise County, and have you had any encounters with TDA gang members in the county as well?
We just had one identified last week in my jail. That was booked in my jail. Our gang unit within our jail, we have 3 jails here in Cochise County, identified one. And so what you're saying is exactly correct. I mean, they're filtering throughout the United States right now. They're settling in communities. They don't care about America. They don't care about human life. This is just one element of so many that an open border brings. And we haven't even seen that. We've seen tragic events around the country. I talked about that at the beginning of this. Bottom line is it's only going to get worse until every day that goes by is another event staging for another tragedy, or a tragedy happened already. But this gang, I tell you, you're going to hear more and more about them. America needs to wake up. America needs to unite. Who would ever thought, Daniel, that we would have debates over a secure border, have debates about the rule of law, and have debates when it comes to allowing evil within our communities, whether it be fentanyl, whether it be human beings, and saying, well, let's talk about it. No, there's no more talking. We have to put some action here, and we need leaders that are going to do that. If leaders don't want to do that, get out of the way. First of all, you're fracturing your oath of office to support the rule of law and protect this country and protect the citizens within.
And this is where it always becomes insanely baffling to me, because especially with how Biden-Harris administration have handled this over the last 4 years, when you have TDA and then you have things like MS-13, or even something like the Chinese triad, I think whether it's the mainstream media that does it, or if we want to put the label to it, Democrats, but even sometimes Republicans too, they make it so that it's this label that those that are coming in are the migrants looking for a better life, when we know that, especially in these last few years, that those that are coming over have these cartel criminal gang affiliations. Like there's no joke to it. They are the worst of the worst. They're not coming really for a better life or opportunity. They're looking for illegal opportunities, such as trading drugs or trafficking, or just bringing the worst kind of behavior that you can imagine. And I find it baffling how there's just still so many Americans, even people I talk to in my personal life, that still don't understand that is a large crux of who's coming over, rather than what the media is trying to portray. So I do want to ask you, I mean, you work hand in hand very closely with Border Patrol. Have you seen almost that shift over the years, where it really is less of the family of migrants coming over looking for a better life, which there's no doubt that there are those, but Has it become more of a shift where it really is these criminal affiliates, and maybe even so much as demographics? Because there's still the misconception that people think it's always Mexicans or South Americans, and yet we're seeing these numbers of even Chinese or those from the Middle East and countries around there, that those are starting to expedite too.
Well, Daniel, when you look at there's 160 countries breaching our border annually. That's number one. There's 190 some countries in the world, and 160 are breaching our borders. That should be alarming in itself. And then let's go back and look at the intent. We have no idea what the intent of a lot of these people are. And then you look specifically into my county where it's all gotaways. We don't have give ups. And so 80, 90% of the people we deal with in Cochise County are single male adults. Now, what is the intent? They're in camouflage, being smuggled. A lot of them are aggravated deportees, which means they've got criminal records. They were deported from this country. You got countries of interest here. You have people with bad intent coming here. And then you look at that small percent of 5 to 10%. Unfortunately, what you see the national media do, and sadly, our federal government, is they take a beautiful frame, they frame an ugly picture, and then they try to sell it to you. As long as you look at the picture, not the frame, you're going to see the problem. But if you look at the frame that disguises and conceals what a horrible picture this is, the bottom line is, remember the days, let me just share this with you. Remember the days when our federal government was boring, where they were there, they did their basic things that a federal government does. They provide resources, they provide oversight on the mandates the Constitution allows them to do, but you didn't hear much from them. I miss that federal government. We need that federal government back, because right now we have a federal government that's lacking in trust, it's lacking in transparency, and politics are driving it to a degree many people have never seen before. And right now, that is harming this country. It's dividing this country. It's causing violence in this country. And I hate to say it, people look at the anger that's being put in this country, and people are acting that out, which I never condone violence. We got to get back to a boring federal government and what they were constantly put in office to do, because right now they're infecting every community in this country.
You know what? Just as an overall emphasis, because just meeting you and meeting your team years back. I mean, you guys. If I wanted a protective service, I think I would go to you guys. You guys are awesome. And like you said, you have over 4 decades of experience. You know this like the back of your hand, literally. Would you say, I mean, and totally however you want to word it, I mean, would you definitely say this is the worst the border has ever been? And I mean, I feel like sometimes when you go 2 or 3 years back, sometimes that is the definitive statement. And yet somehow it literally, at least in my opinion, and I don't even live down there, it seems like it just does get worse, whether it is the crossings, whether it is, the federal government not providing the security, or whether it's, having a presidential candidate finally come visit and act like everything's going to be kind of like hunky dory when it's totally not. I mean, would you say this is definitely at this point in time, the worst it's been?
There's no doubt about that. I've seen the good of the border, I've seen the bad of the border, and I've seen the ugly. This is the ugliest I've ever seen it. And it's ugly for reasons we've already discussed. When you neglect the problem and you turn your back on it, and then there's intellectual, let's face it, Washington, D.C. is not stupid. They're not stupid at all. There's a plan here. It's just never been shared with the American people. But the plan carries out every day. And that is to allow as many people we can. I would never said that to you 3 years ago. I say it now because today people still come across. In fact, a reporter here in the this morning that's down here went down to the border to get set up for the vice president's visit. Here's a group coming across the border, all camouflaged up. She goes, "Hey, look what I got." The bottom line is it happens all day long, and whether it be Cochise County, it'd be Hidalgo County, all the way through is happening. While we sit in Washington, D.C., and I blame both parties. I'll just be honest with you. We have great congressmen trying to do the right thing and women trying to do the right thing back here. But when under Trump, we had the White House, we had both houses in Congress, and we didn't do anything. In current times, President Biden had the White House and he had both houses. You remember, we have done nothing to change the laws. But I'll put a caveat on that, Daniel. The laws are there already. For example, you come across the border illegally, you're automatically expelled. Well, under this administration, that doesn't happen. We've set the rule of law aside, and we've claimed them. I claimed them under their asylum, and we claim that it's okay to be here now. That's a fracture of our rule of law. Get back to the rule of law. And if you let the rule of law dictate this, not politics, we can fix this today.
You know what? I do want to ask you this. It's a theoretical, but I think our audience would absolutely love it. And I know my father said it before too. Let's say we could get Mayorkas out of his position and you were the head of DHS. What would your day one or week one actions be for securing the border, or at least getting it to that process where it's way more secure than what we're seeing now? And then, as well as handling the millions of illegal aliens. I know it's a almost like a wide ranging question, but handling the millions of illegal aliens, especially those that have those criminal affiliations, and at least getting them out of the country, or at least putting them in handcuffs and away from risking the safety of citizens.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would get with the President of the United States. I would sit with the Vice President and say, what is your mission? Talk to me. What do you want done? And then I would assemble a task force. My recommendation would be very simply, let's get the rule of law to guide where we're going, but you got to get the right stakeholders at the table. So the message is collective, state, local, and federal. You get your border sheriffs, you get your sheriffs in the country, and your border sheriff northern too, because they're getting hit very hard. Get some coastal sheriffs together. We already have a National Sheriff Association border security team. Let's get them into the White House. Let's get our governors on these borders. Let's get our governors involved, or at least their staffers, and get some community leaders. And let's sit there along with our legal team and say, what is the rule of law? How do we establish a border policy under the current rule of law? Congress ain't going to change overnight. We know that. But what can the rule of law do for us right now? And get those rules applied, get those actions applied. And then when it comes to deportation, we've said this. This is one thing Secretary Mayorkas and I agree upon. That is, we need judicial oversight on that border immediately. So when you come across that border, you say asylum claim or credible fear, your claim is heard within hours. And if it's not a viable claim, you are deported immediately. It would decentivize this border right away. When I said that to Secretary Mayorkas 3 years ago, he said, yeah, I 100% agree with you, Sheriff Dannels. But ask yourself, what has happened over 3 years? There's been no action on that. You got to get judicial oversight and put that in perspective of community. You take judges out of every community in this country and you arrest a DUI suspect, a murder suspect, and there's no judge, what happens? They're released. No different on the border. You get judicial oversight, you get the rule of law, you start applying the rule of law, and you get your leadership from Border Patrol, CBP in there, to include DEA. You start putting these task forces together, these subcommittees together, and let's get this out and let's put out to the American people, this is where we're going. Deportation comes under a rule of law, but you can't delay that, because as long as you delay, guess what happens? Opinions, sensations, emotions all start kicking in. Well, we can't. The rule of law overrides all three. It truly does. It's the letter of the law. We always want spirit, but the bottom line is longer waits, the bigger the spirit gets.
Right. But, Sheriff, just because I think there are so many Americans out there that are very disappointed in their federal government and maybe have that angst of that this problem, until there is the serious leadership in the federal role to get this under wraps and to help you guys out, what would be maybe your advice to someone who just wants to make sure that they are well protective and safe, and if they see something, kind of say something in a degree when it comes to, we have so many different towns now that are accepting, and, not necessarily with their consultation, these different migrants that are, we just saw with Springfield, Ohio, right? But all these different migrants that are coming in that are unvetted, unchecked. So I guess what would be your general advice to those, maybe just for them to look out for themselves as this kind of still progresses?
Well, we're a two-form set of governments in this country. We have the federal government, we have the state government, and I want to respect that. But understand the federal government has oversight on immigration. They have sole oversight on that. And we've been told that as local law enforcement, state law enforcement. But I would be very clear to every city in this country, if you want to be a sanctuary city, that's up to you. But you got to follow the rule of law at the federal side too, because we're going to follow the rule of law. We're making that very clear. But with the high hopes, and transparency and trust has got to be built into everything we're doing here right now, because we got to build those two T's right there. And that's going to take time, which is the third T involved in this. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we need our city mayors, we need our city governments to stand with us on this. Because there's people in this country, migration is a key to our success in this country, but it's got to be legal. We got to get legal back into this, because illegal is not, it's not doing anything good for this country. In fact, it's doing just the opposite. And these countries that are sanctuary cities that do it, and they do it legally, if they say come here and they've been processed legally, that's on you. That is on you. When it comes to the bottom line is, when you say, hey, I can't control this, I'm overwhelmed, our city needs money. You made that decision. You made that decision as a local government, and then you're going to have to find a way to get back out of that. Consequences are not just for the people in this country, it's for our government too.
Sheriff, for our last question here, because I just think our audience would love to hear this. I know you guys see crazy things every day, but has there been any wild stories maybe in the last few weeks when it I know you just mentioned the TDA arrest, but has there been any crazy out there stories within Cochise County in the last few weeks regarding an arrest or just situation with an illegal alien criminal that you guys have encountered?
Well, there's a lot of stories. I could write a book.
Yeah, yeah.
But let me say this: I'll two-part this for you. The first one was we just did an episode with Dr. Phil, which you'll see be coming out. But within that 24-hour period, we had, I believe, it was 4 chases, 3 crashes. But one of the crashes was very unique. Let me go back. This was not one of the crashes where a female migrant was picked up in camouflage, like that's what we see. The driver, who was a deported migrant from another country, actually was the driver. He was living in Nevada, came down here, was allowed to stay here on some papers. I don't understand that. Again, goes back to that lack of judicial oversight. Long story short is the female migrant says, let me out of the car, let me out of the car. And he wouldn't. She ends up jumping out of the moving car. The car behind sees it, stops, calls 911. We end up getting the individual law enforcement up by Interstate 10 before he hits the I-10 with the rest of the migrants. He's sitting in my jail right now for kidnapping. We had another one where as a crash, he ran from us, went over a fence, went over another fence and broke his femur, snapped it right there. These are just a 24-hour window. We had a migrant claim she was sexually assaulted. Our major crimes team did that one. We had a rescue of another migrant in the desert, was dehydrated. And then I had a truck driver from South Africa with an empty semi down here, and we can all, with no commercial driver's license, nothing, had no answers to any questions. And I think we can all figure that one out. But I would say, to show you how infected this problem is, and this is 2 things that, besides 2 former cops that have been down here smuggling, which is just the most disappointing, wearing the badge, and you wore the badge and you're down here smuggling, shame on you. But here's another one. We had a bus driver, a school bus driver, that dropped off his last kid for a school and then went to the border and picked up migrants that came across illegally.
Kidding.
And then this is I'll leave the best for last for you. We had a funeral home here, responded to one of my calls. We had unattended death, and our mortuary is in Tucson. So the funeral home came out, our deputies, detectives put the deceased in the body bag, put in the back, and the mortuary vehicle was heading to Tucson. We had a tip. We got in. We ended up stopping the vehicle again. Inside that vehicle, besides the deceased, somebody's loved one, there were 5 or 6 illegals sitting around the dead body in the back of a hearse. And a 13, 14-year-old kid escorting the funeral vehicle who was a fugitive, which was related to the funeral home. That's how bad infected it gets into a cultural norm that we're seeing down. We got school bus drivers picking up migrants at the border, camouflage, same seats that these kids ride in, and you got a loved one in the back in a body bag, but you got migrants sitting around them, smuggling with a dead body. That just kind of puts it in perspective, Daniel, what we deal with. Nothing shocks us anymore, what we're seeing down here. But I want to shock Washington, D.C., because they're the ones who can fix this. And you got a loved one in the back in a body bag, but you got migrants sitting around them, smuggling with a dead body. That just kind of puts it in perspective, Daniel.
All right, guys. I hope you really enjoy that interview with Sheriff Dannels there. He's a fantastic man to interview, and just having the privilege of meeting him a few years back was honestly insightful enough. I mean, when we did the ride around, just seeing what him and his officers have to deal with and kind of what he just said in that interview, it just seems like every day it's a new level of madness. So major respect to him and his entire department. DML had to get to a meeting, so it's just me here to close it out. I just want to remind you guys that if you go to dmlcbd.com/store, you can get the face serum for an incredible price at $10, along with another merchandising item. Just to address this real quick, because I got an email about it, this is not a going out of business thing. This is we're moving locations, and we're trying to condense things that we've just had over the years. So, between hats, T-shirts, the book that we released last year that I had wrote, The Wild Adventures of Robin in Summer, you can get it at an incredible price of $10, but the big benefit of that is that you get the DML CBD face serum with it, which I use quite literally, no exaggeration, daily, morning and night. So definitely jump on that. As for tomorrow's programs, like we mentioned earlier, tomorrow night we're going to have a live stream for the VP debate. The debate itself starts at 9. We'll probably get on here at around 8:30 just to talk about it a little bit before it starts up. But as for tomorrow morning's program, we have another interview lined up with Xi Van Fleet, who grew up in communist China and has been a very big activist in the last 2 years about how communism has kind of come to the United States and taken its root in different forms. It's a very insightful interview, and I had a great time talking to her, so that will be for tomorrow. As for the blessing of the day, I would like to give it to Michael John Klein, but I also would like to give a giant blessing to all of those that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. I mean, this was an insane storm. I mean, 90 plus people killed. I think it's almost breaching 100, and just small towns in the Appalachia region and, even Northwest Florida as well that have been just decimated. So blessings to everyone that's been impacted. I hope you stay safe, and I hope that the recovery efforts can be a little more swift in the coming days. So with that, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys have a great start to the week, a great Monday. So see you tomorrow.
Get the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast every day by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and download the DML News app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and Team DML.